I just basically had all these musicians in my life, and I didn't realize it was unusual. So all around here, like we talked about this too with Roswell Rudd, like him and my father played together as long as I could remember. Roswell was another staple in my childhood. So I was wondering, growing up, if you were surrounded by musicians that same way.
Well, it was not so much in the normal course of business, but it was really easy to seek out.
Okay.
And when I was a kid, which I think precedes you by a decade or so, the hotels were raging up here.
Yeah.
Like all of them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't distilled down to just a few. It was
right.
The flagships like the Concord and Grossingers and
Granite,
Browns
Neville,
and
Browns,
Kutchers. And then there was the second tier, which were like the Neville.
Yep.
And Tamarack and places like that. And then the third tier, which was like the Granite, and
yeah.
Although they probably didn't think of themselves that way, they were. And then beyond that, there were smaller hotels, even like the Brookside and Fallsview. And then there were bungalow colonies. And each one of these places had entertainment for the guests. So it was a place you could either, if you were too young to be employed, you could go hear music. And then the drinking age was only 18. So all the bars in the area were just a 20-minute drive away.
A 20-minute if you were leaving the bar, 5 minutes on the way to the bar.
Yeah. Any one direction from where you and I both live now, half an hour you were in New Paltz, Rhinebeck, Kingston, Woodstock, to a certain extent, Poughkeepsie and Newburgh. And all those places had bands, and there were no dark nights. It was Mondays, Sundays. What I used to do in my parents' house was say goodnight, go to bed. I had a bicycle parked outside the window, and downstairs the kids' basements were in the basement, and the kids' bedrooms were in the basement, and I could park a bike outside the window, and I would dress up in my fanciest clothes so that I could sort of blend in with the city folks at the hotel. And then I would drive on my bicycle at 10 o'clock, 11 at night. This is like when I was in 5th, 6th grade.
Yeah.
To one of the hotels. And there would be a teen room, which would have a rock band.
Yep.
And girls, which was very important.
Yes.
And then the cocktail lounge would have a real salsa band, like a serious Latin band.
Seriously, yeah.
And then the theater would have the headliner and the show band.
Mm-hmm.
So just wandering around the hotel, you could see 24 working musicians doing their thing.
Yeah.
And then I would get back on my bike after a full night of music and sneak back into my bedroom window and in a matter of hours get up and take the bus to school.
Did you get up and go to school? Like that was, you were after staying out all night?
It was not an option. You did that. And Rondout, when I went to school, because of the centralized school district, there wasn't really a townie hang. Like they call kids from the town townies, and you picture them on a street corner, skipping school.
Yeah.
When we were kids, school was the place to commingle with your friends because everybody was getting on a bus and driving 20, 25 minutes from their own little hamlet to go to school.
Yeah.
So it was incentive to not skip school.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I was growing up, one week, I should say, you had the Lou Perez band, which was the Latin band in the small bar, and then you're
talking about the Granite?
Yeah, and then in the show band, I saw and hung out with, like, I remember one night, this was in the summer, watching Milton Berle's rehearsal with the band and doing his show, and then
How old were you?
13, 14. And I have pictures somewhere of that. I do have pictures meeting Uncle Milty that you probably don't know Milton Berle, or maybe you know the name. I don't know.
Milton Berle. I know that name. Is he
He's a legendary comedian from.
I think I have his joke book. My brother got it for me for Christmas, and I read through it. And I've watched a few videos, but I'm not super familiar.
Yeah, the show the show was amazing on television, but he was the main act. And then the following week, Tito Puente was there for a whole. They would have this Latin summit, and so I got to see all of those kinds of people on a regular basis. They all rolled through these different hotels.
Yeah, that's a very for a young musician growing up this particular area. You were never short of stimulus.
No,
that's for sure.
No,
and because the drinking age was 18, if you had older friends and you were 15,
I had older brothers.
You weren't that far off.
Right.
So if you just kept your voice down,
yeah.
Invariably, in my case, it hadn't changed yet.
Yeah. Me either.
And secured some documents of somebody who sort of looked like you.
Yeah.
And I also went as far as painting an eyebrow pencil mustache on my face so that I could get in.
Wow.
To see people play. And some of the bar owners knew that they were aiding and abetting a minor, but they were encouraging because they knew I had pronounced that I was going to be a musician.
Oh, I got you.
And I'll show you. And so a lot of the guys that own bars around here were they'd either have to hide me or throw me out or something or wake me up.
I don't remember there being too many like law enforcement people caring so much about, like, if you were in a bar at that age to hear music, I don't remember really people messing with me at that. I mean, even in New York City, when I would go to jazz clubs underage, they didn't, I never been checked, and I couldn't grow a mustache until I was at least 27, 28 years old, but no one ever proofed me going into the Vanguard.
I think you caught a lull in the action when my same period of time in the bars underage was during Vietnam.
Oh.
And there was the full-on generation gap and the freaks and the hippies against the greasers and the rednecks.
Yeah.
Rosendale was there was a battle line. One side of the street, you felt safe and amongst your own, and I'm speaking for both sides.
Uh-huh.
And on the other side of the street, you were behind enemy lines, and could disappear without a trace for like a long time.
One of the caves, yeah.
And there were many frequent appearances by law officers in the hippie bars.
Gotcha. Yeah.
For various reasons, underage or narcotics or busting the bar owner for, running a child. Never mind.
Yeah. Old school Rosendale. Yeah. I got you.
Now, was a lot of these shows, obviously there's a big social element to what you're going out to do, but were you particularly enamored with any musical acts? Were you like following bands at this time? Was that the main focus, to like hear certain acts?
It was all good by me. It didn't matter if it was the hotel, mainstream entertainment, like Matt was talking about, or if it was a psychedelic rock band. Like, for instance, at the Well in Rosendale, there was music 7 nights a week. So, and 7 different bands. There wasn't like a residency type of thing. So, you could see the same band once or twice a month and sort of become a fan. And a lot of the guys that I ended up playing with later on were in those bands. So it was kind of like, those were my first, rock star idols that I looked up to until I got in a band with them, and then I realized the folly of my ways.
Were there any particular like shows you remember that really musically inspired you, and were there any particular shows where it was like such a crazy experience that you were like, oh, this like rock star lifestyle looks like fun?
Well, I mean, that started out for sure in the teen rooms in the hotels where the rock band would play. There were a bunch of guys from Ellenville that called themselves the Dimensions. And I remember all those guys in the band, actually. Although I haven't kept up with what they were up to. But they had these 13 to 17-year-old girls that would come to dance in the teen rooms. And I was 10, 11, maybe. So, the die was cast. I looked up to these girls quite literally because they were all quite a few years older than me. But I saw how the rock band was definitely flush with girls in the audience.
Yeah.
In Poughkeepsie, the Chance, which is still open.
Yeah.
But in those days, there was a club in New York called the Bottom Line,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a rotation that was similar to the Fillmore East. And those bands that played in New York at the Bottom Line would stop over and play in the Chance. So you saw major acts in the Chance. And I can recall, to answer your question, seeing James Brown there.
James Brown played the Chance?
In the early 70s.
Wow.
Everybody played the Chance. Taj Mahal, Bonnie Raitt.
I think my first guitar concert was I saw Stanley Jordan at the Chance.
Wow.
When I was like, I was young. My mother took me, so I needed somebody who was old enough to get me in.
Well, if you saw bands at in New York, the next place you'd see them was the Chance on their way to Albany or to Boston.
I never thought about that.
It was part of the rotation. And some of the other clubs, like the Joyous Lake, would pick up those acts too.
Yeah.
So I saw John Mayall in the 60s at the Joyous Lake.
Wow.
But that particular night that I saw James Brown at the Chance was like leaving your body. He had the band, the guys. I think I don't think Bootsy was on bass anymore. I was too young to actually know who the guys were. Now I do.
Yeah.
And it was just raise the hair on your arms, raise your feet up off the floor. A groove like you've never heard. And probably never will hear again.
I had no idea that he was that he came through the Chance. I get so he was on tour. There was on the way out of New York, on the way up to North. I never thought. I just didn't know that was a thing. There, I didn't know that James Brown was there. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. I mean, there was. Go back and you can probably Google posters from the Chance. It was full on concert band.
And the opening act for Stanley Jordan was the Digital Dolphins, which is Brubeck's. That was the Brubeck band, and that was not Dave, but the kids.
Yeah.
And then Mike D'Amico would have
Darius
been, well, that was the first night that I had seen Mike D'Amico. I think Mike D'Amico was playing guitar in that. He was a guitarist in the area as well, and been playing with that band for now 30 years.
I love hearing Mike play.
Mike's a monster.
He's great. I did a tour with Mike. I guess it was the 80s, early 80s, with Rory Block.
No kidding.
The blues artist. And
shout out to Rory Block.
Yeah, she was amazing.
You know who recorded a lot of her albums? Scott Petito, who will be on the show in a couple of weeks.
Excellent. Excellent. Rory had Rob Leon on bass.
Wow.
And Pete, oh man, he's going to kill me that I can't remember. I'm going to look it up.
Somebody in the area?
Yeah, local drummer, Pete O'Brien.
Oh, Peter O'Brien.
Peter O'Brien.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter. It took me a second.
No, I can't remember names or anything anymore.
Well, I looked at my clock and it said 1:11, and the mojo came out, and Peter said, "Me, you."
Yeah, and Peter would say that to you. Yeah.
You Richard.